This is another video in our series on quadratic equations. In this quadratic video, we're looking at distributing, which is when you multiply factors together, and then when you take them back apart again, we call it factoring. So factoring and distributing are two opposite operations. You distribute when you multiply factors together, and you factor when you take them back apart again. So let's look at an example of how that works. Okay, instructions say simplify by distributing. So here's our equation. We have this factor out front, 2a, and we have this other factor right here, this whole group here inside the parentheses. So we're going to multiply 2a times everything inside the parentheses. That's distributing. We're going to do it using a distribution box. So let's make a distribution box. The 2a goes out in front, and all the things inside the parentheses goes on top of the distribution box. Because we had three things inside the parentheses, we're going to have three different boxes to put our answer in. Okay, so we're going to do the first one first. So a times a squared. Well, when you multiply two numbers together, both a's, you add their exponents. So a to the 1 times a to the 2 gives you a to the 3. And because it's a 2 coefficient, it becomes 2a to the 3. Okay, now let's do the second one. This is a to the 1, and this one up here is also a to the 1. So we're going to add their exponents. A to the 1 times a to the 1 is a to the 2. And the coefficients, 2 times 2 is 4. So we end up with 4a squared. To get the last box, there's no a's up here, but there's a 2 times a 3. 2 times 3 is 6. So we end up with 6a. So our answer from distributing is 2a to the 3rd plus 4a squared plus 6a. All right, let's do another example. This time, instead of multiplying together, distributing, we're going to factor it back apart. So we start out with polynomial meaning three terms here, multiple terms. So we start out with this polynomial, and we're going to pull it apart by factoring something out. We're going to take something out of it and see what two things could be multiplied together to get to this answer. So let's start out by making our distribution box, and we're going to take this polynomial and we're going to put it inside of the distribution box. So 10a squared goes into your first box, 15a goes into your second box, and our third box is a 5. Because there were three terms here, three things being added together in our polynomial, we needed three boxes to put it into. Okay, so let's see what we can pull out here of all three of these. Well, this has an a in it, this has an a in it, but this doesn't have any a's in it, so you can't take the a's out. 5 will divide into 5, 5 will also divide into 15, and 5 can also divide into 10. So 5 is a number that can divide into all three of these numbers. So we can take a 5 out. So 5 times what, and we'll put the answer right there, is going to give us 10a squared. Well, clearly a squared, because we have an a squared in the answer. So we're going to need an a squared up here, 5 times something a squared. Okay, but 5 times what gives you 10? Well, 2 times 5 is 10, so we need 5 times 2a squared gives you 10a squared. Let's see if that's true. 5 times 2 is 10 and a squared. All right, let's try the next box. 5 times what gives you 15a? Well, you're going to need an a because there's an a in the answer. But 5 times what gives you 15? Well, 5 times 3 is 15, so we have plus 3a. 5 times 3a is 15a. Okay, one more factor. 5 times what gives you 5? Well, 5 times 1 is 5. So taking our original polynomial, we can break it up by factoring out of 5 into 5 times this polynomial here. And there's nothing else we can take out of here because this doesn't have any a's, so we can't take a's out. And there's no number that you can divide into 1, 3, and 2. So we already took out the biggest thing we could take out. We factored this 5 out. Okay, let's try it again. Here's our polynomial, and we're going to try to factor out as much as we can. Well, let's take our polynomial and we're going to put it in boxes. Here's your distribution box. A3 goes into the first box, 4a squared into the second, and 4a into the third. So what will come out of all three boxes? And we'll put it right there. Well, you can't take a 4 out because 4 comes out of this one and 4 divides out of this one. But there's no 4 in this first term. So you can't take 4 out. Well, how about A? There's an A in here, there's an A in here, and there's an A in here. So we can take out an A. So A times what gives you a to the third? Well, we're going to add the exponents. So a to the 1 times a to the 2 gives you a to the 3, because we add a to the 1. 1 plus 2 gives you 3. Okay, how about this middle one? A times what gives you 4a squared? Well, clearly it's a times 4, because there's a 4 here inside the box. But for what? How many a's? Well, a to the 1 times a to the 1 gives you a to the 2, because you add the exponents. So what we need up here is a 4a. A to the 1, 1 plus 1 gives you 2. Okay, let's get the last one. A times what gives you 4a? Well, 4. 4 times a gives you 4a. So we took our original polynomial here, and we factored it into a times the parentheses, a times these items here inside the parentheses. All right, let's do a classwork. Looks just like this. We try to factor out as much as we can. And it's the opposite of distributing it in. So you may have to watch this example again, but let's look at the classwork. And here's your first problem. So you may want to watch example 2 over again, but you're going to need to make a distribution box and take out as much as you can. Pause your video, and then we'll look at my answer and compare. All right, let's see what I got. I took out a 3. Why that? Why? Because 3 divides into 12, 3 divides into 3, and 3 divides into 6. Okay, pause your video and we'll try the second one. Okay, I took out a 6. And I took out a 6 because 6 divides to 6, 6 divides 6 A's, and 6 divides that 12 right there. So I was able to take out a 6. I couldn't take out anything more than a 6 because there's no A in this last term. So I can't take an A out because there's no A in this one. Okay, pause your video again, and let's have a look at this one. Okay, let's see what I got. I said you could take out both a 3 and an A, because look, there's an A in this term, there's an A in this term, and there's an A in this term. So A comes out of all 3 of them, so I can take out the A. I can also take out a 3 because 3 divides 6, 3 divides 3, and 3 divides 3. So I was able to take 3A out of this polynomial, and I end up with this quadratic polynomial. Quadratic meaning it's to the second power. Okay, let's try another one. All right, let's see what I got. I said you could take out 4A. A is in this term, A is in this term, and A is in this term. So A comes out of all 3 of them. So there's my A coming out. And I said you could take 4 out because 4 divides all 3 of those numbers. Okay, let's look at another example. This is example 3. Okay, factor completely. Okay, here's your polynomial. And we're going to try to factor it apart. So we're going to make ourselves a distribution box. And we're going to put our 3 factors, the 3 things being added together. We're going to put our 3 factors, our 3 terms inside of the boxes. Okay, so what comes out of all 3 of these boxes? There's an A in this one, there's an A in this one, and there's an A in this. Okay, so A will come out of all of them. And you couldn't get an a squared out because there's no a squared in this last one, but there is an a. Okay, what else? Well, you can't get 30 out because 30 doesn't divide into 2. But you could get 2 out because 2 divides 2, 2 divides 16, and 2 divides 30. So you can divide out both a 2 and an a. So let's take that out to the front, and let's figure out 2a times what? What goes here to give us 2a to the third? Well, a to the 1 times a to the 2 gives you a to the 3 because you add the exponents. So we want an a squared up here because exponent of 1 added to an exponent of 2 gives you that exponent of 3 right there. Okay, how about in the second one? Well, this is a squared, so a times what gives you a squared? Well, a times a. A times a gives you a squared. And 2 times what gives you 16? 2 times 8. So you want 8a, because 2 times 8 gives you 16, and a times a gives you the a squared. All right, let's try the next one. 2a times what gives you 30a? Well, 2 times 15 is 30. So 15 times 2a gives you 30a. So we're able to factor this original polynomial into 2a times that quadratic equation. So we have 2a times this. Okay, now let's look at the instructions up here. It says factor completely. Now you've recognized that this part here is a quadratic, and that quadratics can be factored with a puzzle box. So when it says factor completely, we have not factored this completely because there's something else we can still do. We can factor this part apart. So we already took the 2a out, but now we can break this piece here, the quadratic part, into 2 factors. So let's do that. So looking at this part here, what goes on top of the puzzle box? The 15 from the end, plus 15. And what goes to the bottom of the puzzle box? Plus 8 from the middle. So what numbers do you multiply together to get to 15, and you add them together to get to be 8? Well, what's all the possible ways to multiply to 15? Well, there's 1 times 15 and 3 times 5. Well, 1 times 15 won't add up to 8, but 3 and 5 will add up to 8. So we have 3 and 5. So this part here, our quadratic part of our equation here, the quadratic part breaks up into a plus 3 and a plus 5. But we still have this part here, the 2a. So factored completely, you take the original polynomial, it breaks up into the 2a, and then the other 2 factors, a plus 3 and a plus 5. Okay, so we're going to try some classworks, look just like this, and you may need to come back and watch this slide again on example 3. And here's what they look like. So try the first one and look at the instructions, factor completely, which means you're going to have to pull out whatever will come out, and then if you've got anything left, if you've got a quadratic, you're going to have to use the puzzle box to factor that. So pause your video, and then we'll look at what I got. Okay, let's look what I got and see if it compares to what you got. Okay, I said you could take a 3a out because 3a, there's a's in this one, there's a's in this one, and there's a's in this one. So a's will come out, and 3 divides 3, 3 divides 6, and 3 divides 3. So I said you could take a 3a out. But then after I took the 3a out, I was left with a quadratic expression that I could break into 2 factors by using a puzzle box. Okay, so let's try another one. Same thing over again. Pause your video, and then we'll look at what I got. Okay, let's see what I got out. I said you could take 2a out because there's a in this one, there's an a in this one, and there's an a in this one. And I said you could take a 2 out because every one of these is an even number. So I knew a 2 came out of all of them. And the quadratic, I was able to break into these 2 factors. Okay, let's try again, and pause your video, and then we'll compare answers. Okay, let's see what I got. I said take a 4a out, because a in all of them, and a 4 divides all of them. And then I said the quadratic expression I had left could be broken into these two factors. So this is factoring completely. Notice that you can't go any further than this. There's nothing else that these are two numbers being added together. You can't pull anything else out of them. So this is as far as you could factor them. So we have factored completely. Okay, last one. Pause your video and then we'll look at answers. Okay, for this one, I got 2a comes out because they're all even numbers. And then I got these two factors from the quadratic part. Okay, good. Let's look at another example. Okay, example 4. Same thing over again, factor completely. So let's put this thing into a distribution box and see what we can pull out of it. Well, there's no a in this last term, so we're not going to be able to take an a out. These are all even numbers, so for sure you could get a 2 out. But is 2 the biggest thing we could take out of this? 4 divides 4. 4 goes into 24, and 4 also goes into 32. So we can take a 4 out. And since 4 is the biggest number in this first term, you couldn't get anything bigger than a 4 out. So let's take a 4 out, and 4 times what gives you 4a squared? Well, 4 times a squared gives you 4a squared. 4 times what gives you 24? 4 times 6 is 24, plus also you're going to have to put an a up there because there's an a inside the box here in the answer. So 4 times 6 a's gives you 24 a's. And in the last one, 4 times what is 32? 4 times 8 is 32. So factoring this apart, we take the original polynomial, and it becomes 4 times this quadratic expression. See, it's a quadratic expression because if you notice, the first variable is the squared power, a squared. So that makes it a quadratic expression. Okay, so looking at this, we need to factor it. We know we can factor this because we can put it into a puzzle box. So what number goes on top and what number goes on the bottom? Plus 8 on top, plus 6 on the bottom. And what numbers can you multiply together to get to 8 and you add together to get to 6? Well, the different ways to multiply to 8 would be either 1 and 8 or 2 and 4. There's no other way to get to 8. So 1 and 8 won't get us to 6, but 2 and 4 will. So this part here, the quadratic part, it breaks into a plus 4 and our other factor, a plus 2. So altogether, don't forget the 4 that comes out front. That was the first thing we factored out. You get the 4, and then you get the other two factors, a plus 4 and a plus 2. Okay, let's do another classwork, and exactly like this one. So for the first one, pause your video and see what you get, and see if we get the same thing. Okay, for the first one, I said you can pull out a 6, and that's the only thing you can yank out of it. And then you factor the quadratic expression that you're left with. Well, 6 divides 72 by 12. 6 divides 48, because 6 times 8 is 48, and 6 divides 1. So 6 comes out. You couldn't have taken an a out because there's no a in that term. Then after I pulled the 6 out, I was able to factor the quadratic expression into these two factors. Okay, let's try another one. This one here. Pause your video. Okay, for the second one, I got also taking out a 6 and then factoring the quadratic. Okay, pause your video. For this one here, I took out both the 2a, because there's a in each one of these terms. I took out the a, and then I took out a 2, because each one of these is an even number. And I couldn't have taken out more than 2, because the biggest number in this first term is a 2. And after I took out the 2a's, I was able to factor the quadratic part into these two factors. Okay, let's try the last one. Pause your video. Okay, let's see what I got. I said a 16 comes out. 16 goes into the first one, the 16. And 16 divides 64, and 16 divides 64. Because 4 times 16 is 64. And then I factored my quadratic into those two terms. All right, thank you for watching the video.